Hey nerds, what's up? So, spoilers, an intrinsic part of our book community. Well, and a lot of other communities too. But it's become a vital part of book reviews to talk about spoilers or the lack thereof. It feels like spoiler warnings have become the standard for being a good community member, or just a standard to not get yelled at a lot in the comment section. And before some recent conversations I had, I thought nothing of it. Spoiler warnings. What could be more average, universal, or historical? Turns out, I was wrong. A few weeks ago, I posted on my Instagram about Brandon Sanderson's first Kickstarter book, Secret Project No. 1. I had said the title of the book in my book review 4 days after the book had been released and received by all supporters, and I got a fair amount of comments saying I had spoiled the title. I didn't agree. Okay guys, I'm just gonna come out and say it. The title of Secret Project 1 isn't a spoiler anymore. It's not, the book is out. But it led to some good conversations. One of the most interesting ones was one I had with Kyle from the channel Read by Kyle, in which he said he listened to a podcast that stated that spoiler culture was a relatively new phenomenon, and that research showed that spoilers actually didn't even ruin the enjoyment of something. To say I was intrigued to know more is an understatement. So today we are going to talk about spoiler culture, why and when it even started existing, the research behind whether spoilers even hurt enjoyment of a thing, personality traits or situations in which spoilers may matter more, and my personal feelings on them. See you after the jump. The first and probably most interesting thing to think about is that spoiler culture is relatively new. Of course, the concept of a spoiler, I'm sure, has been around forever. The idea of simply ruining the part of a story. In fact, Alfred Hitchcock pleaded to viewers of Psycho in 1960, please don't give away the ending, it's the only one we have. However, the first known use of the word spoiler in the way that we use it in modern times, or the way we use it today, wasn't until 1971 in the magazine The National Lampoon. Otherwise, the use of spoiler warning seems to be linked to Usenet news groups, some of the very earliest forms of internet forums in the 1980s. This should not be a surprising revelation. Spoilers and spoiler culture really came around with the advent of the internet, specifically using the internet to talk to other people. Before that, we really only talked with people in our direct community that we knew about the things that we were watching or reading. We might have specific groups we came and met with. We might even belong to some sort of mailing group or newsletter, but other than that, we were really only talking to our friends. And it was probably something like, hey, I saw this movie, or hey, I read this book, you should really check it out, it's really good. The internet fundamentally changes how we communicate with people. We can go on there any time of day or night and find someone awake to chat with. We can find endless places and groups and forums to discuss more and more specific parts. I don't think there's any sort of media that you can't find being discussed on the internet. We also aren't always directly communicating with a single other person, rather just browsing communications that often have already happened, making it much more likely we will spoil ourselves. We're not talking to a single person where we can say, hey, stop, I haven't seen that yet. Instead, we are stumbling upon things already written or already communicated, and again, may inadvertently ruin something. The second bit that has really influenced spoiler culture is the ability to watch something at a different time than anybody else, or otherwise known as streaming. The first most famous inception of this is probably TiVo in 1999, but both Netflix and Hulu started their streaming services in 2007. Streaming has vastly changed how we watch TV. I mean, even as a kid, I still remember having to tune in to a specific channel at a specific time to watch something, and that was it. Or if I had a favorite TV show and I just missed an episode because I wasn't home, just didn't get to watch it. That was it. I missed it. We might know the time something was airing, or it would be in a movie theater only and we'd all go and see it. Now, someone can binge an entire season of TV in one sitting, while others may watch one a day, or even one a week, or one every other couple of weeks. People don't have to watch something right when it airs, which gives us a chance for people to be much quicker than others, and for there to be just the possibility of spoilers. As a side note, I find it really interesting that in my research of the top 50 to 100 best twists of all time, the vast majority, about 85 to 90% of these twists, come from movies that happened after the rise of the internet. Now, this could just be the skew of modern internet writers writing about things they were alive to witness, or it could also show the skew of the time period that we started placing more emphasis on spoilers and twist endings. It should also be noted that topping every single one of these lists is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back and The Sixth Sense, two movies that seem to be in every single discussion revolving around spoilers. It feels that they are some of the original movies we talk about in terms of spoiler culture and when that really kind of took hold and hooked into our society. As proof of this, look no further than the New York Times profile done on George Lucas in 1976. This was a full year before Star Wars: A New Hope was released. However, in this profile, George Lucas literally spoils the entire plot of the first movie. The entire plot a year before it's released. Clearly, we were a lot looser about this stuff back then. But let's get to the heart of this discussion with the most important question. Do spoilers ruin our enjoyment of something? Well, it turns out that the majority of people think spoilers ruin their enjoyment, but research actually shows the opposite and that it doesn't hurt it at all. One of the most looked to research on this topic is one done at the University of California by Jonathan D. Levitt and Nicholas Christenfeld in their research titled Story Spoilers Don't Spoil Stories. In the study, each participant read 3 short stories. One was unspoiled, one was spoiled accidentally, or rather in a way that felt accidental as the research assistant pretended to just be describing the story while adding in a spoiler. And the final story was given an extra paragraph at the beginning that spoiled the story so that it seemed as if the spoiler was a part of the story. Each story was rated for enjoyment on a 0 to 10 scale. In every case, in a statistically significant way, in every type of story read, participants enjoyed the story more when it was spoiled. One theory offered in the paper stated, reading a story with foreknowledge of its outcome may be analogous to perceptual fluency, in which perceived objects are processed with ease, an experience that is associated with aesthetic pleasure, positive effect, and story engagement. Thus, despite intuitive beliefs about the effects of spoilers, there are plausible theoretical reasons to think they may not ruin the pleasure of reading a story. A lot of these articles discussed that many stories we engage with have very predictable endings, and that doesn't tend to ruin anything. Did we go into Star Wars ever thinking that the heroes wouldn't be successful? Is that really a spoiler? In whodunit style mysteries, we always know that the detective is gonna solve the case. The idea is their journey to get there. Or what about the giant market of retellings or even just book adaptations to movies? In those cases, we know the ending. We just want to see how they play out on screen or how small changes affect the overall story. If twists or unknowns were the only thing that mattered and made a story good, then people would never reread their favorite books or rewatch their favorite movies. We'd never go see an adaptation. We'd never go see a remake. That can't be the only thing that matters in a story. Of course, we need to talk about the caveats here in this research and what might change how spoilers affect something. Other researchers, Benjamin K. Johnson and Judith E. Rosenbaum, who have authored several papers together on spoilers, mostly revolving around why people may enjoy or hate them. And while they've talked about that their research has supported most of the findings in that University of California study, they've also researched a lot on caveats to that and how certain personality traits or even certain types of stories affect how much spoilers affect something. For one, they found that ruining comedy or ruining the punchline of a joke is one of the worst spoilers you can give, and they find that it actually does ruin enjoyment. Knowing the ending of a joke, knowing the joke before it happens, completely takes the wind out of the sails, and you're probably not going to find it funny. On the opposite side, they found that the horror genre is one of the least problematic ones to spoil because people actually tend to like knowing what's going to come to ease their anxiety, and that the joy of watching a horror is to see it play out on screen and not necessarily the mystery of what's happening. And that also extrapolates to the purpose behind why someone is experiencing something will affect or change how they view spoilers. And this is my own conjecture. This wasn't in the research, but I also think certain fandoms have different purposes when they are consuming media that can also heavily affect that. Two examples I want to talk about are Brandon Sanderson and Terry Pratchett. The Brandon Sanderson fandom, the way we experience his books and things with the Cosmere tends to be a more spoiler-heavy fandom. We care about spoilers a little more. We try to hide them more because we feel like we are tied to people experiencing that in a certain way. Whereas I've noticed in the Terry Pratchett fandom, Discworld fans do not care about giving away spoilers at all, because generally that's not really the point of Pratchett's writing, is like the secretive of the plot. It's more his wit and how he writes characters that matter. And so I think, Again, the purposes behind the stories or how we engage with them matter a lot with spoilers. They also talk about the personality traits of the person being spoiled mattering a lot, and it can come down to control in both ways. For example, someone may be more upset by being spoiled if they felt that it was out of their control, if someone said something or they stumbled upon something and it wasn't their choice to spoil themselves. On the flip side, a lot of people who like to be in control purposefully spoil themselves because they want to be in control of the emotion they are feeling during that media. If we go back to a scary movie, some people like to spoil themselves on when things are going to happen, so in the movie, it's not as anxiety-inducing. They also found in their research that people with less self-control tended to spoil themselves more voluntarily because they couldn't wait. Overall, I love one quote Rosenbaum had to say. People are notoriously bad at predicting how much a spoiler will affect them. They assign a lot of weight to knowing the outcome of a plot, whereas a lot of our enjoyment actually can come from just the process. We are not very good at figuring out what we like and what we don't like sometimes. And honestly, this is just a very true part of human nature. Humans are notoriously bad at risk assessment. I mean, if we think about how many people are afraid to fly in an airplane versus how many people are afraid to drive in a car, despite the fact that the likelihood of perishing in a car is way higher than on an airplane. But again, as humans, we tend to put a lot of emphasis on certain things, even if research doesn't support it, like how much spoilers will ruin our enjoyment. So let's talk about my personal feeling on spoilers. I think that this research is a great jumping off point for us to discuss this more in depth and kind of like determine our feelings on them, especially because I think in the fantasy book community, we are very phobic of spoilers and it's kind of a hot button topic. And I really love it when research can change a previously held notion I had or my conception of things. And I feel like this research really has made me look inside about how I've previously felt about spoilers. Because just for the record, in general, I am actually a pretty spoiler phobic person. I often don't read the backs of even books. I don't listen or watch or read spoiler-free reviews of books. I like to go in with really zero knowledge. And even The Secret Project 1, I didn't know the title until it appeared in my hand. Like, I really avoid spoilers in general. And as I was thinking about this, I was realizing that I think how we feel about spoilers may also be connected to the way we first experience something. And for example, I was very worried and very specific about how my son was going to experience both Star Wars and Harry Potter. I really wanted my son to not know Darth Vader was Luke's father. And because of that, I showed him the movies maybe a little younger than I normally would have because I wanted to make sure that that happened. And it was worth it. It was a great moment. He was totally floored, and I loved that. And I feel the same way about Harry Potter because I think about these experiences I had, like think about between the 6th and 7th book when you went to the midnight premieres and there were all of these signs and stickers and posters like, is Snape good or bad? And we were all trying to figure it out and talk about it. And I want him to have that same experience. So I've been like super careful with spoilers. And when it boils down, all I'm doing is trying to get him to relive my experience. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I wonder how much it's coloring it. Because maybe there are people who all Harry Potter or all Star Wars was spoiled for them, and they still had a fabulous experience watching it for the first time. It may have been a different experience, but it could have been just as valuable as the one I had. And so I wonder if a lot of our attachment to spoilers and stories deals with our own personal love of an experience we had that we want others to replicate, whether or not that replication is needed for enjoyment. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying? I also think our definition of what a spoiler is has maybe gotten slightly out of hand. Like, I know I've said it before, but a title of a book after it's released is no longer a spoiler. I've had people say that just even mentioning a character name is a spoiler. At that point, if everything about the book is a spoiler, when is it the person's responsibility to just stay off the internet? If you don't want to know anything about something, maybe it becomes more your personal responsibility. Not all details constitute a spoiler. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. We've talked about how spoilers weren't nearly as much of a thing before the internet and streaming. We've also learned that research shows spoilers don't affect our enjoyment or ruin things as much as we thought. I think that's going to be a hard one for this community to swallow. I think it's a hard one for me to swallow. Is it going to change my behavior? Those are the questions I want to ask you guys. Did this change your opinion on spoilers? I mean, the research is there. Do you disagree with the research, I guess? Do you feel like in the fantasy genre that it matters more? Are you gonna try to be change your behavior, like less worried about spoilers now that you know it probably won't hurt your enjoyment? Let me know in the comments below. I think this will be a very interesting topic to discuss. And as always, if you like these kind of deep dive videos, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.